Hello, Wayne D Kramer here. I'm going to do a reading to you from Heroes of Time Legends, Murdoch's Choice. Prologue. Centerpiece. Fiddles and flutes trilled like the skipping of children, punctuated by lively drumbeat. Men guffawed in raucous laughter and clapped the shoulders of comrades, and enough mulled drinks had been consumed to poison the ocean. Here, upon the rooftop terrace of the Wayward Sailors' Inn, it was just another celebration of old salts and jolly tars from the Seafaring Mercantile Guild. Starlina Murdoch was neither a salt nor a tar. She wasn't old or particularly jolly. She was simply here, hoping to prevent disaster. She flipped long brown hair with streaks of light blue away from her lean, well-tanned face, a wine glass steadied in her other hand. With a piercing glare, she looked throughout the gala, scanning the cluster of motley riffraff and quietly snorting her distaste. This was an inn of Warvonia, within the province of Rockney, an old town situated along the kingdom of Tuscany's eastern coast. Not much had changed here for centuries, and many of its inner workings happened out of the light of day. But at least one of its constants was the simple, subtle charm of a seaside town, with its rich, salty air and its maze of curvy, sloping streets that seemed impossible to navigate save to those who knew them. Tonight's celebration revolved around the return of one of the guild's most renowned captains, her father, Captain Zale the Gale Murdoch of the Queenie. The ship had become one of the most famous merchant vessels in the kingdom, if not the entire continent, under her father's command. It didn't take long for her to spot her father. He stood across the terrace, a stout, boisterous man surrounded by fawning sailors rapt by his every word. Even from this distance, she heard his gruff, yet gentlemanly voice overpower everything else. "It was a fish monster, all right, with arms like a giant squid and legs like a frog. As soon as one appeared on deck, I speared it with a pike like a pickled herring and launched it from the ballista." Those around him stared agog, as though in the presence of greatness incarnate. He lifted his hands to calm their apparent adulation. "Not saying I'm a hero, just saved my entire crew and our bounty, like any captain worth his salt would do. We slayed the rest of those guild demons right there on stern in glorious victory." He raised his arms high, and I said, "Men, tonight we dine on fish! Ha 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 ha!" Shaking her head, Starlina downed the rest of her honey-mulled wine, relishing its smooth yet spicy bite. She wasn't really here for her father, nor was she here for the hearty libation. She was here to see the best friend that her father was already stealing from her. Jensen Carrick, a young man of 16, and Starlina had known each other since childhood. Their relationship was a coy evolution beyond friendship, an innocent handhold here, a little shoulder rub there, arms touching in the tavern when seated among other friends. They finished too many of each other's sentences, laughed just a little too much at each other's jokes. Starlina loved every bit of it. Attending this soiree had been a last-minute decision. She hadn't told Jensen she was coming, and already she wondered if it was a mistake. So far, she hadn't even spotted him among the scallywags ambling about the terrace, some steadier than others. Jensen had talked often about sailing. It wasn't until recently, as he approached university age, that Starlina realized how serious he was about pursuing it for his actual career. That didn't make it inevitable, nor was it easily accomplished. Long-haul sailing positions in Warvonia's guild were in high demand, especially with the most successful crews. Most likely he would have to accept something less elite, perhaps at the harbor, or something administrative. Then came the opportunity of Jensen's lifetime. It jostled Starlina to the soul. He'd won a contest, besting dozens of other seafaring student hopefuls. This granted him an opportunity that didn't usually come until well along in the university program. The opportunity for first-hand experience aboard an actual ship of the guild. By some horrid knife twist of fate, Jensen was able to choose her father's ship. Supposedly, they'd sailed just beyond the edge of the Great Crescent. Supposedly, they'd battled Gillians, giant mythical fish monsters, slaying every one. Supposedly, they'd plucked ambrosial grapes straight from the ethereal realm, parting the waves with their valor, and snuffed the fires of Ghoul with naught but their unfathomable bravery. With sailors, who really ever knew what to believe? Starlina took another glass of wine from a passing servant's tray and leaned against the stone plinth of a statue as she sipped. At this vantage point, she was a few steps higher than the main terrace, giving her a broad view of the attendees. She sighed and glared at the statue's face. It was of a sea captain, pointing his cutlass in the direction of the ocean. She frowned at the scene before her. She had been certain Jensen would be here. Swirling her glass absently, it occurred to her that she was likely the youngest one here. With her 15th birthday less than 6 months away, she was nearly of the young adult age class. She already felt mature beyond her years. She lived alone, bussed tables to support herself, rarely saw her parents, and knew her limits with wine better than most of the tipplers roaming this place. She downed that glass and grabbed another. Her mother had left months ago, supposedly for Charm in the south. Good riddance, as far as Starlina was concerned. They'd had little more than fight after fight over her mother's destructive life choices with countless men. It was a relief when her mother finally left Warvonia. Starlina still wished the best for her, that she might find a better way for herself in a different place, although she doubted it. The 425 days of each of Starlina's 14 years already felt like a long slog toward adulthood. There were exceptions, of course. There was the time she spent with Jensen, when 28 hours never seemed long enough for just one day. Her reverie was broken by her father's roaring voice as it carried across the terrace. "Blubberpots, sots, and jiggle queens, every one of 'em! Ah ha ha! Pop pop!" He did some goofy little jig that earned endless claps and chuckles from everyone around. Starlina rolled her eyes and looked away, beyond the inn, where below stretched a calm and deserted plaza, one of many that was relatively unchanged since feudal times. Soon enough that plaza would be filled with the boisterous din of drunken sailors stumbling away from this place. She'd been here long enough. Maybe it was time to give up on her hopes of talking some sense into Jensen. She took another sip of wine. "Another glass, my lady?" spoke a luscious voice from behind her. "Shall I arrange a carriage for your safe return home?" She gave a lopsided smirk and spun to face the source. There stood Jensen, staring at her with those beautiful hazelnut eyes that had hypnotized her since their childhood. His brownish hair had hints of muted yellow throughout, and his lean, square face had a handsome, angular jawline. He still smelled like the sea, like a sailor, salty, rugged, with hints of heedless adventure. Not a bad scent, necessarily, but it stoked a sense of urgency within Starlina. She was already losing him. "A carriage for two, Mr. Carrick," so that you may whisk me away from this place at once." Maybe that was a little direct, but she wanted his attention. She wanted him alone with her, away from all of this. He raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Carrick." He shook his head, looking dejected. "And I thought we had at least achieved a first-name basis, Miss Murdoch." She fixed him with a glare, about to respond when a portly, glossy-skinned man pushed between them with a guttural belch. Her mouth fell open in disgust as she watched the man hobble away. "Jensen," she said sharply, "let's find some place less obnoxious. A stroll on the beach, perhaps, or the market square, or even the harbor." He laughed. "So soon? The fun is just beginning." She sat her half-emptied glass upon the statue's stone plinth. "I've had quite enough of sailors for one night, thank you. All I can smell in the air here are sweat and alcohol." "It's not so bad once you get used to it." Starlina and Jensen turned at the sound of her father's coarse laughter bellowing into the air. "The guy just looked at me and said, 'I never met a bridge I didn't burn.' Ha 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 ha!" Cackles erupted all around him like a pack of hyenas. "Well," she said, turning back to an amused Jensen, "I suppose I don't want to get used to it." There was a flicker of conflict in his face, but it vanished with a stroke of his goatee. "You should have seen us out there, Starlina." Now he was outright giddy. "Fog everywhere, utter stillness. Just out there in a quiet cove right at the mouth of the Border Crescent, where the prize rested in an underwater cave. The Border Crescent, Starlina, on my very first voyage. And then they came, the Gillians. They're real as badger anthropods. They actually climbed up the ship, some of them even to the dock. Your father's crew." He paused, overtaken with awe, drawing a breath. "They're true fighters. Those monsters were vicious, like nothing I've ever seen. I actually took down one with a hatchet." She gaped at him. "That sounds absolutely horrific." "If only you could have seen your father. He spiked one like a kebab and bolted it from the aft ballista." Starlina hardened her stare. "So I've heard." This was worse than she'd thought. Now he'd triumphed in the face of true danger. What ambitious, sea-bitten young man could resist that? Of course, the excitement was fresh. Her father and Jensen had been away for nearly a month, returning just 2 days ago. She'd already grown up wishing her father could simply disavow the seafaring trade. Was she now destined to wish the same of Jensen? "It's this town," she seethed inwardly. "Boys enamored with the ocean since childhood, like some vast rite of passage, as if everything else were meant for lesser folk." Jensen looked out toward the lower terrace, where they could still hear her father's laughter. "Even here, your father is quite the centerpiece." "So that's it then?" asked Starlina. "You'll be joining my father's crew, sailing off into the great beyond?" "That's far from official, and anything could happen over my time at university. I can't deny being excited, though, for I think my chances are far greater having joined in that voyage." Starlina flashed him a glare. "Why must every man in this town take to the sea? Is there not enough to be done here upon the land?" Jensen chuckled dismissively. "Let the land be for those who like their vision hampered. Give me a clear horizon, the promise of adventure and discovery. Overrated tosh, if you ask me." If not for the dark, he might have seen the heat rising in her face. "I don't think I could ever be with a man in the Seafaring Guild." She ignored the sudden concern in Jensen's eyes. "They're far too absent." "Some voyages are long," he said, "and some are short. But they come with great reward. And is it not true that time apart makes the heart grow fonder? Time apart leaves the heart to ponder, more like." "Well," said Jensen, "I think you should keep an open mind. If I one day get to join with your father's crew, well, there's none closer to reaching the guild's mastery bar. Imagine he does reach it. I could be one of the few sailors in history to be a part of a crew under Grandmaster status. We can take fewer jobs, and the best jobs." It was Starlina's turn to laugh. The mastery bar was basically a guild-wide goal, more like a challenge set by the officials. Reaching it was like trying to reach a rock from out of Elioran's planetary rings. They raise that bar every year. You might just grow old chasing after it. All they do is make it so no one can ever hope to achieve it. "Your father will," Jensen replied with an air of finality. There would be no arguing with Jensen. Ever since he was old enough to know what sailing was, it seemed, he had idolized her father. Maybe Jensen was a lost cause after all. "There are plenty of sea-related occupations that don't require sailing, you know." He tittered uncomfortably. "A little late for me to change course now." She arched an eyebrow. "It's only the 33rd of Jervans. Plenty of time to make a change." His 17th birthday was fast approaching, on the 5th of Jovador. Only a few short weeks until those hoping to be students would declare their desired disciplines before a panel of university professors. Jensen looked dreamily toward the planet's rings in the sky. In the hazy air, they illuminated the terrace in an almost ghostly night glow. "After that last voyage, I'm all but certain to earn admission." "That's what I'm afraid of." He ran a hand gently through her hair. She inhaled at the touch. "Ah, Starlina, I so long for the day when you can join me upon a ship. Then you might see how truly majestic it is." She shoved his hand aside. "I've been on a boat before, Jensen." "Not with me on it," he said with a wink. She stabbed him with a sharp glare. "I'll stay on solid ground, thank you, where humans are meant to be." "Then you've decided upon your own university declaration?" She hadn't, but she still had time for that. "I suspect it shall be whatever keeps my feet firmly upon the land, sir. Something here in Warvonia. I'll make this town so striking that the eyes of every citizen can't help but aim within, instead of toward the ocean." Starlina loved all forms of design, fashion, architectural, interior, and so she imagined her career aspirations leaning in that direction. "Anything might develop for me while you're away, weeks and months on end," she added before he could comment. "It might be time for me to leave this old place. Miskune might suit me better. Or Rucka, with a view of the palace." "You could go anywhere, Starlina, and it will always be my mission to find you there, if even to view your beauty from afar." Curse him to the fires of Ghoul, she thought. He's completely unflappable. Her icy countenance melted into a thin smile. "You would too, and I'd be all for it, waiting for you like a fool." Lute and cello chords sang out, whilst kettle drums pounded a beat. Brightly dressed minstrels in an upraised gallery took over to liven up the occasion. Jensen held out a hand. "I hope your feet aren't planted too firmly. Care to dance?" She took his hand. He took her waist. And together they floated about the terrace like youthful swans on a lake. As children, they had danced together countless times to music much like this. Yet, as Jensen's strong hands clasped her sides and twirled her with such control, suddenly the dance felt anything but childish. For countless songs they spun and glided about until nearly an hour had passed like a few minutes. Everything around her disappeared, all of it a trifling blur. She saw only Jensen. Finally, the music stopped, leaving Starlina breathless in Jensen's arms. Shouts and laughs and conversation of the gala again reigned around them. Her attention was only on him. He held more than her sides. He held her heart. In truth, he always had. If only she could make him see the joys of life with her, without so itinerant a job as sailing, then all could be perfect. Jensen released her. "You've only gotten better at that," he said. She drew in a breath. "As have you, good sir. I have something for you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a polished gemstone like pinkish-purple glass. "This is lilac kunterpite. It's said to align the hearts and souls of people who care for each other over great distances. Might be a load of rubbish, but who knows? I got a pair of them from a friend in the guild, so now I have one, and so do you." She took the stone and looked it over, not quite knowing how to react. It was a genuine gesture, but with it came that promise of great distances, a constant she'd already had to endure growing up with Zale Murdoch as her father. "It's beautiful," she said. "Thank you." Their moment was interrupted by her father's voice, which had a remarkable ability to carry a broad distance. "Let's hang him first and then have the trial!" The men around him were in stitches, their faces red, likely as much from the drinking as the laughing. "That silly man will be the one to break the mastery bar?" she asked. "And I thought I was the one who's had too much wine." "He will, all right. You just wait and see. Your father's unstoppable. Captain Zale the Gale Murdoch. The man, the scourge, the legend." The nut-brown eyes of his dashing face looked into hers. He moved closer, very close, his face inching toward hers. She jolted back, despite the playful smirk tugging at her mouth. "You haven't asked my blessing to approach like that." He stopped, only a breath between them. Sailors don't ask questions. They take action. He kissed her cheek and walked away, Starlina's heart racing and her mouth grinning from ear to ear. Thank you very much for listening to the prologue from Heroes of Time Legends, Murdoch's Choice. If you'd like more, you can pick this up at our website, heroesoftime.com, or at bookstores like The Book Dragon in the UK and other places online. Thank you very much, and may the winds fare you well.